Oh,
Did this work?
Did we? Yes. Oh my God. I'm like, okay. It's okay.
Can
We
you
did
hear
it.
me okay? Yeah, we did
Yeah.
it.
I run a tech company. I don't know if you know, but I totally don't know how to use Instagram Live apparently. So
I feel
thank
like
you
now
so
I'm
much.
not going to get invites to do beta testing for Wethos anymore.
No. Of course you will. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a bunch of folks coming in.
Me.
And we're going to get kicked off. So I'm just going to introduce our guest and the leap, and then we'll dive into some questions. So
sounds great.
Welcome, folks. I'm Rachel Renock. I am the co-founder and CEO of Wethos, a platform that helps freelancers team up and form what we're calling virtual studios. So we make it easy to price complex projects and split payments and manage your end-to-end business. Every week, or rather bi-weekly now, I'm catching up with a different entrepreneur who has taken the leap and gone into the freelance business or scaled up from there. So today we have a really awesome example of that, Sarah. So Sarah Salvatoriello, am I saying that right?
You are. That was beautiful.
Thank you so much. I practiced.
Half the battle.
I practice a lot. Anyways, is a brand strategist and the founder of Ampersand, which is a creative branding studio helping to rebrand small and medium-sized businesses and sort of navigate through that communication endeavor. Sarah spent 18 years of her career building in-house creative teams at some huge companies, which I mean, like your name list is like crazy. Conde Nast, TripAdvisor, The Knot, creative director and strategist of Armchair Psychologist. So she's been doing this for a while and is a true expert. I'm super excited about what you're working on, and I'm really excited to hear more about your journey. So I'd love to kick it off there. What drove you to, taking the leap into freelance, and then how did your business sort of evolve from there?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, I mean, as a designer, I always kind of had a side hustle going on, like you can demonstrate that you're capable of making things. And so, as I was working some of my first early jobs at a school, I was always kind of doing stuff on the side and helping friends kind of make their dreams realities, make their, their side hustles, their weddings, their babies, whatever it was, like these big milestones, kind of give it some of that pomp and circumstance. And so that was always kind of in the background as I was then very tunnel visioned on becoming a creative director. That was like my big drive.
I've been
right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like,
that's like the thing. I'm like, I'm gonna be a creative director by the time I'm 26. Like that was like my crazy, ridiculous thing.
Exactly. Yeah, same. And so I was very fortunate when I, worked my way up in media. I found myself at the Knot and started to really see how maybe that goal wasn't totally aligned. And so seeing that a lot of the creative director role was tied up in a lot of other things, tied up in a lot of the people management, not doing a lot of that creating. And so I started to kind of wrestle with that. Found a wonderful opportunity at W, which was kind of this underdog publication at Conde Nast. Worked there for a while, building out that in-house team and positioning creative services as something that could be really consultative, not just hands executing in a program, but how can we talk brand strategy? How can we make something that is viable and appealing for advertisers? And that gave me some really good experience at making something out of nothing. But then what I was kind of seeing was that regardless of where you're doing that work, even a small company within a larger organization, you're going through these similar exercises. It's usually still this like values alignment, figuring out what's driving you forward. And so that was always kind of working in the background. And then I went to Bon Appetit and Epicurious, which were these like really wonderful, large brands and Passion Point, like people love it. And it still was the same. And so I kind of had that moment of like, okay, maybe I'm finding a little more joy helping people outside of work. Maybe I can be bringing some of this to people that don't have the means of these larger companies, people that don't have these giant in-house teams. Totally. So that was kind of where I started dipping my toe and started consulting a little more. And then took some of those ideas I worked Conde corporate, tried doing it across all 22 brands, kind of had my proof of concept, like, yeah, this is all the same, guys. It's all
Oh, that's like when I worked on Hershey, they owned like 10 different candy brands, and it was just like crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same like foundational activities though, and so
yeah, totally.
you know, after
Same rinse and repeat.
exactly,
Sure.
and not that there's still a lot of work to be done. So figuring out like if we can kind of get over some of these hurdles where we think we have to be new shiny toy, can we actually do the really good work of figuring out what is different, what is, you know, really specific to this thing that we're doing? And that's super interesting to me. So that's where I had been doing freelance as short girl long name, and kind of had this aha moment of like, it's not about just me. It's always about the other people around me and the other things that people are doing. And so we launched Ampersand and Ampersand before the pandemic. And then, you know, a lot of stuff went sideways. But now that we've gone through a couple seasons with COVID, that's where we're really focusing our attention now, is how can we kind of help people go through these same exercises and figure out that strategy that works for big brands, but for anybody, you know?
Yeah, no, totally. And it's funny, like when I was, when we were running our sort of like agency model and we were talking to clients a lot, like something I used to say all the time is like, look, like brand strategy is business strategy.
Yes.
Like this is about like who your target customer is, how much money they're possibly willing to part with, you know, like what are their demographics? And then in addition to that, it adds a layer, I feel like it adds a layer onto that business strategy that is more around like, why should they care?
Yes.
And like, that's the piece that I think people are missing, or rather don't necessarily understand about brand strategy. They think about brand and they think about like logo and color and you know, the visuals.
Yes, always.
Right? Yeah, always.
And I feel like I'm often using rebrands as kind of the Trojan horse to have those conversations. It's like, yeah, I'll get you, sure. You can have a logo, but will you sit and talk to me about your feelings and what drives you for
totally. Yeah. And you know, when you pair that with like the research and the strategy brief, and you've basically literally got a business strategy together, as well as a communication strategy. And I think that's the thing that like a lot of people have a hard time understanding, and that's why it's so hard to sell quote unquote brand strategy. But I think it's one of the best ways to get your foot in the door somewhere, because to your point, like you really learn deeply about your client, and now you've got knowledge that would take them longer to onboard someone new.
100%. So many
like,
founders.
How about this? How about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It just all starts spinning from it. You know, once you can kind of get that out of their brain, it just becomes a whole new experience, which is awesome.
Yeah. So one thing that I was really interested in, because I was like taking a look at your website, and I saw that you provide your like a lot of transparency around a lot of your business, which I love personally, because, you know, I mean, our product.
Yeah.
I feel like, though, one thing that I hear a ton, or one question I get a bunch, is like, what about the secret sauce, quote unquote? Like, aren't you worried that people are going to steal your secret sauce? And, you know, I personally call bullshit on that, because I think, to your point, like, there is a bit of a formula, but how you execute on that formula is what really actually matters, not necessarily the structure of the scope and whatnot. So I'm curious, like what drove you to kind of take the opposite approach of like, whenever everyone's zigging, you zag. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how that might benefit your clients or your business, and sort of like what went into that thought process around. I think on your website I saw pricing packages were transparent, which is awesome. And the process stuff, I loved that. Just like the process docs overall of like what the experience is going to be like. Such a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking so that I can hear what you have to say.
I mean, I think yes to all of that. It is hard, I think, when you're first starting out, and this is something that people do in business also, right? How many branding clients don't want to really say out loud what it is that's special about them, because they're nervous. They have to protect their IP. And I think something that we really try to do is show that your IP actually isn't whatever you've been telling yourself it is. Because when you're translating it to like, oh, we are the Uber of blah, 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 like that's already tying someone else into it. It's no longer that special. But if we can really figure out what is just yours, what is uniquely yours, that unlocks everything. And I think that's when you get to the like resilience. What is going to stand the test of time? What is going to, you know, I'm at a point in my life now where I'm thinking about something surviving my lifetime, you know? So like,
Yeah.
what is that thing gonna look like? And I think the only way to have that is if you share it. So there's like no real benefit to holding it. I really think you have to share it and share it freely and let people make it theirs. And I try to do that by leading by example. I'm like, yeah, I did this thing. You can benefit from it. Have it, please.
100%. Yeah. I mean, our in our product, the library of scopes and services that we have started with our own agency's data. We published all of our own pricing and all of our own scopes first, to sort of like set the stage. And then from there, it definitely snowballed. And I think the benefit of that transparency, particularly around like lifting the veil around the process and what goes into the scope and how you think about pricing, like it creates more accessibility for more people to enter the space who might be brilliant but didn't come up in like a traditional agency background and don't necessarily know those things. And so I think it's like a huge thing that is super important. And I imagine, I was curious to get your thoughts on if you think that level of transparency on your website like speeds up your sales process at all with clients, or rather sales or selection process, I guess, when you're trying to vet people for, you know, project opportunities and what you want to do next.
Yeah. I mean, and hopefully it's all an experiment. It's all learning. We're always trying new things to see what that kind of sweet spot between saying everything and, you know, you want people to feel seen. So how much of it will help them feel recognized and recognize that we would be a good fit, and how much is too much of us and we're not leaving enough room for them. So I think that's always the balance that we're trying to strike. But I think with process and pricing and all of that stuff, we try to kind of say, here's where we're operating from. This is where we're coming at it. If you want to push up against us with this, like, we welcome that. We welcome, you know, the feedback. We welcome sparring buddies. We try to infuse some of those cues around the site. We have like a choose your spice level for criticism and critiquing, you know, like I
love that.
We're trying to keep it an open conversation. And if people don't want to have that conversation, if they use the word just, like, I just want a logo, like, that's not going to be a good fit for us. And I want to know that at the beginning, you know?
Totally. And the thing is like, you can't see yourself in something if you don't have the time or take the time to know yourself. And so I think what you're also kind of self-selecting for is like people who have done the work to like think about these things and to recognize like, oh yeah, my thoughts are kind of all over the place right now, or
absolutely,
this process could be better, or, you know, whatever it might be. And like, you can't even get to that conversation, right, unless they've done the work up front to kind of recognize those things.
Totally.
If people won't acknowledge problems or issues, so you can only help so much, right? Like,
absolutely. And we've had some really long tail clients. We've had some clients that first reach out, and I'm not exaggerating when I say years go by, and then they come back, and because they remember, oh, they helped me figure out really early days. I'm in a completely different place now. I'm going to be able to actually appreciate some of the things that they have to offer. And that's where one of the things we've been trying to do in the last few years is be intentional around, like, we offer rebranding. Like, you need to have had a brand. It needs to be a distinct move towards something and away from something. You know, we try to find not just the balance, but the counterbalance. Like, what is the thing that's going to carry as much weight in that opposite direction, and make sure that you're allowing space for that instead of just pretending it doesn't exist. So trying to really own those little pieces of difference, because that's where I get excited. That's where I want to spend all my time.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you want to find clients that align with those values and like align with how highly you prioritize that. And I think like that's super important. I'm wondering, in terms of, So one question that I get a bunch, and I was really curious about this when I saw it on your website, which was you had this banner at the top that said like book for June and July, which I
Yeah.
love. And
That's new. So thank you.
yeah. Oh, and it's interesting, and I'm so curious to get your thoughts on it, because I get this question a lot from people too, which is, how do I manage, or how do I balance my bandwidth and you know, the inbound opportunities that are coming into me, and then like I end up turning down opportunities sometimes because it's hard from like there's a lack of, I guess, predictability, right, in your business sort of cycles. And so
Yeah.
even if you think a project can take, I don't know, 2 months, 8 weeks or something, sometimes they run long, etc. So I was curious, like, how do you typically manage like the growth of your business and then your bandwidth? And then I was also curious, like, how do you, or what has gone into so far the process behind like communicating the booking ahead of time? Like, do you ask for a deposit? Like, how do you manage that, and how do you set expectations? And also, how do you find people who are planning that far in advance? Because I swear to God, the amount of clients that used to call us to be like, everything's on fire, I need to fix it yesterday, and I'm like, I can't do that for you. Like,
totally. And to be clear, like, we are very much there right now. Like, we have clients that are like, let's kick it off the start of April, and you're like, that's like end of this week. Okay, great.
Like April 4th, and you're like, next week.
Sure. But I think one of the things that we have been seeing is that we have some clients that reach out and they still have a little bit of work to do. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, we've made some kind of work at your own pace tools that are some of the prep work that they probably can do on their own time before they really want to engage other people. And so what we're trying to see if we can do is start seeding that idea of, you can not need us until June, July. It can be a couple months, and you can work to figure out what your drivers are, work to figure out what kinds of things, what kind of spaces you're going to be showing up, so that you really know what it is you're going to need to be speaking to. And that's going to take some time, and that's a good thing, right? So how do we kind of get them thinking about that sooner? So it's actually a relatively new addition to the site to try to get people thinking a few months out, because we're noticing that the ebb and the flow is usually that we get a bunch of inbound requests in January, and then they go quiet, and then they come back in March with a vengeance. And it's like, well, let's see if we can do that a little better, you know?
Yeah. Wow. You know, it's funny. It's crazy though, because like when I think about it, and I think about it from the perspective of like somebody coming to your website and is interested in your services or looking for these types of services, and now you've basically given them all of the tools to hire you, and you've answered a lot of their questions already without even having to hop on the phone, for instance. Around how much will this cost? Well, now I can think about budget, and I can think about what I need to sort of advocate for internally if I need to get budget from elsewhere. You've given them like process, which is like what to expect, and that can also help them gauge like how much time might this take, or what other stakeholders need to weigh in. Like, those are really important tools too. And then what I heard you just say is, you're kind of providing like a little bit of a toolkit for people to do that unpacking ahead of time. And you're giving them, again, the tools to prepare to hire you, which is brilliant, to the point where it's almost funny. Like, you know, like it's such an interesting thing, because it's basically the exact opposite of what everybody says, which is like, you know, the secret sauce thing. But in reality, I wouldn't be surprised if after a few months you found that the quality of people coming through has gone way up, and you're probably going to be able to close new business with like 1 to 2 phone calls if they have truly had those touch points with you, which is the ideal way to save bandwidth.
100%. And that kind of recognizing the difference between me as a freelancer doing something on the side and me trying to actually run, I hesitate to use the word agency, like we are very small, we are a small shop, but it is really important, a studio, exactly, and it is really important for me to hire people. I want to be paying creatives for their work and valuing that. And so making sure that I'm able to still do that means that I can't be out talking to clients and doing the work, and you know, like there's just that's impossible. So
it's truly
knowing
impossible.
that like my strong suit is getting on the phone and really selling people through. It's like, how can we save that and kind of keep that as precious? And, that took months, maybe years of spending a lot of time on one-on-one calls that didn't go anywhere. But once we kind of cracked that, I was like, oh yeah, we got to do a better job of this.
Yeah, like building trust quickly is a totally a superpower, even though I hate that term, but like if you're able to build trust and establish that quickly, like that's huge, especially in the sales process. Like I get on the phone with a new prospect and I used to be like, what's keeping you up at night? Like, let's unpack that.
Yep.
Like basically their possession. And then
I did
by
like
the end,
coaching
I have a
for
very
a
clear
while.
understanding. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I know what to do now.
Yeah, exactly. I did coaching of effectively clients for a while as almost lead gen, where, companies would get a new co-founder and they had very different priorities. And it kind of evolved into this co-founder counseling kind of thing. It was like, you need so much more than a brand and a go-to-market. Like, let's spend a little time doing some stuff together.
Yeah. Who are you really?
Yeah.
Let's
and
get into it.
And then when I started working with actual like mental health professionals, I was like, I'll ease off that a little bit.
Like, maybe I'll pull back. Probably for your own sanity too, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm like, with the pricing, it's interesting because like scaling up is such a unique challenge. And this is one of the biggest reasons that we started to build our own software, is because managing a business as a freelancer as one person is a very different beast than when you start to hire or subcontract with other people, and more people create more financial complexities specifically. And I think what you used to be able to do as one person, which is like wiggle on budget, or I could do a little bit of that for free or whatever it is. So you start to really recognize that, I think, and then you start to realize that like, oh, if I keep doing that, it's going to impact other people, and so I need to set some boundaries, some standards around this. So like, how is your, I guess, pricing strategy, or I don't know, operational strategy kind of shifted over or changed since you've been shifting that mindset and thinking about scaling up and bringing more people into the business to help service more clients?
And that's relatively new. I would say it was maybe 2017, 2018, I started thinking about it more as a business and trying to see if I could make a go of it in terms of being a job creator, instead of kind of at the mercy of people deeming it valuable enough to give it money, and
from employee to employer.
Exactly. And that would that fascinated me, was like, why can I manage these crazy budgets, but then I'm advocating for a couple $100 here or there? Like it just like really didn't connect. And so when I started really diving into it, it was, it's a lot. It's a lot of things to consider. And that, a lot of it came down to transparency. Are we holding all of these things in the same space at the same time and properly evaluating it? So by having deliverables and who's going to be working on it, and how much of their brain space are you going to be able to occupy in exchange for money? I feel like you can't have that conversation without considering all of those things together.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing that I obviously have strong opinions about like hourly rates and flat rates, and like I think that there's a lot broken about hourly rates. I think it's actually an operational bug, because it creates so much extra paperwork, and it creates a lot of unpredictability with your actual bookings and billings and cash flow. But I think inherently in that, aside from the operational challenges of hourly rates, an hourly rate asks you as a person to put a price tag on your person. Like, what is the value of my time? And time is not equal money. Like, I think that's the biggest lie that anyone's ever told. Like, time is the only thing none of us can get back. And so to try to quantify it also forces a person to now negotiate with a potential client around their self-worth, basically. And that hourly rate, that $1 amount, is supposed to represent your self-worth. And now when you advocate or negotiate, it turns into an emotional process where you inject all these other feelings of like guilt and like, am I really worthy? And is this too much? And blah, 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 da, da, da. And like, it's a spiral, right? And so I think like fundamentally there's a lot of operational issues with hourly rates, but I think also there is just inherently an emotional problem here. And I think as part of shifting that mindset over, right, is recognizing that you as a person are separate from your business as an entity, or rather creating those boundaries for yourself and finding out where those boundaries are, because it's the same. I compare it to like being a musician. Like you're the product, which is like very emotional and very jarring and challenging, and it really starts to like, you know, get tied into all of these feelings of like self-worth. And I think with any process like that, to your point about like, you know, it takes a while to get to this place, thinking about pricing strategies, thinking about how much is XYZ cost, like you're constantly sort of learning and relearning your worth. Like I used to say, we used to say a lot, like, know your worth, know your worth. And then finally I started being like, this feels like shamey. Like, how can we expect people to just know their worth? Like that's such a, I don't know, intense thing. And instead I think that what it's about more so is like learning your worth and continuing to learn your worth as you go on, and as your worth gets higher and as the value gets higher. And I think learning that and relearning that, we need to take like the shame out of it, right? And,
absolutely.
Right now there just is so much shame. Like I joke that like our content strategy is like money and feelings, basically.
Yes. And arguably the like capitalism of it all is my least. Like I get very up in arms very quickly about it. But it's a value exchange, you know. Like I think especially in the last couple of years, we see how finite and limited your actual time can be, in a way that like the biggest luxury would be that we have nothing but time, you know. But that is not the case, and that is definitely not the case for me. And arguably I feel like that's not the case for a lot of people that have a lot of really meaningful and amazing things to contribute. And so knowing that the client is going to get such tremendous value, why try to limit that out of the gate? It sets up like such a weird and disconnected relationship from the get-go. I don't want to be having to weigh, is this worth investing time? Because we're not fortune tellers. We don't, you know, like we don't know if it's going to come in the shower over a conversation or after staying up for 2 nights in a row to get like really into it, and then you have some sort of breakthrough. Like I don't know, the time isn't the thing that I think is more important. It's the output.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like how is like that 30 minutes in the shower like billable? Like, you know, it's just kind of, it's weird.
Totally.
And I definitely agree. We used to use 4 factors. We call this the CUTE system, which is complexity, uncertainty, time, and expertise. And we would basically like weight like low, medium, high on each of those scales, and then those scales were like had a point value, and then that spit out the dollar amount, and that was the basis for our pricing. And then now we've layered on just like community data. But yeah, when you're doing something totally from scratch, or it's a brand new client and like uncertainty is really high, like we would be like, we need to charge more because we don't know what we're going to uncover later down the road. So I definitely appreciate that. So look, we're coming up here on 30-minute mark, and I want to leave people with some advice, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Any last or parting words for folks who are thinking about taking the leap to freelance, or maybe just have taken the leap?
Find a community. Find people that you feel really comfortable talking about in a really vulnerable way. Find people that you can be yourself. You don't have to be in sales mode, that you can really talk to, and people that you feel comfortable referring, because I think that's where also that collaboration, like not feeling like you need to pass on work, but what are ways that you can kind of use the people around you to augment and kind of grow larger than yourself, I think is a big thing that people are very scared and hesitant to do. And I think the faster you can do it, the better off you're going to be.
I love that. Amazing, amazing parting words. If folks want to find you online on the internet machine, where can they do that?
The agency is ampersand.ampersand on Instagram. Our URL is yesand.com. And I am at Sarah Salv, but that's my personal one. So we're trying to keep business on ampersand, but then there's a lot of cute dog pics and stuff on the personal one.
So maybe like do a drive-by of that one and, you know, check out some dog pics.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
highly recommend that you check out their website. I just think it's so different and so interesting, and I think people could take a lot away from it. So I definitely recommend that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Sarah,
much.
thank you for joining us. This was an amazing conversation. I feel like I just had a therapy session, so sorry everybody. But we'll be back in 2 weeks with another guest for The Leap. And thank you again, and have a great night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.